Genesis of the Daleks, one of the most beloved stories of Tom Baker's run of Doctor Who. Its legacy and importance spans across the entire show. This story changed the whole show. I mean, not only do we have the introduction of one of the central characters in the rest of the classic series, Davros, but this is also where the idea for the Time War began in Russell T Davies' head. So we have this story to thank for a lot of the new show now. But the thing is, a story like An Unearthly Child is important to Doctor Who's history, and common consensus is Unearthly Child is sort of So my question that I'm here to answer today is this one any good? Well, let me tell you about it. So the setup for the story: while the Doctor is transmatting back to the Ark, a Time Lord intercepts his beam and brings him to Skaro before the Daleks are created, and basically says, yo, help a brother out, kill the Daleks before they're even alive. Thanks. And then the Time Lord fucks off. And so the Doctor now has to make his way through ancient Skaro to avert the Daleks being created. This results in a really fun but also grim runaround for the next 6 parts, as Terry Nation does a lot of world building in the time that the Doctor and his companions spend running around Skaro. I mean, Nation sort of just paints this horrifyingly beautiful picture of a planet scarred by hundreds of years of warfare, and warfare that nobody can really remember the initial reason for. And that war has reached such a point that the people on that planet will stop at nothing to end it. They will end it at any cost. And then there's the one character that embodies all of that, and that's Davros. Davros embodies that desperation. And it's because he has reached that point of desperation to end the war and be on top, he creates the Daleks. The Daleks are bred from fire, basically. Now, of course, none of that is particularly said on the surface. It's sort of just the backdrop to the story. But that's the thing about this one. You start looking deeper into it, and it sort of just becomes really bleak and depressing. And I am a sucker for bleak and depressing shit, so, like, this is my cup of tea, for sure. But speaking of the backdrop to this story, let's actually talk about the production value for a minute, because this story, other than that giant clam, looks fucking great. The costumes, to an extent the effects, it's still 70s Doctor Who, but the costumes, the actual sets that are built are just, like, really, really well done. The bits where we're not in a quarry on location and Skaro's atmosphere has been built by set designers is really fucking neat, because the lighting there is dark and, like, the sky has this sort of magenta and blue thing going on, and it's just really aesthetically pleasing to look at. And so are the insides of each of the Thal and Khaled bases. They're both really, really well done, actually. The seams are not particularly prominent like they have been in other stories this season. Everything looks genuinely really, really good here, except for the giant clam later on. But yeah, it's one of those rare cases where I'm really impressed by the production values in Classic Who. I want to take a moment to talk about the actors who bring the set and the script to life, because there are really, really solid performances in this one. Of course, as you know, normal, I'm going to talk about Tom Baker first. Tom Baker steals the show with this one, and So does his counterpart in the script, Michael Wisher, but I'm going to talk about Tom Baker for a second. So this is the first time we really see the Doctor have a big conflict about, I suppose, killing a race like this, particularly a bad, evil one like the Daleks, and Tom Baker plays it off really, really well. It's one of his highlights as the Doctor. You see a lot of people talk about it quite a bit. It's the story where he does that "do I have the right" bit, and it's just, for how silly his Doctor can be, the absolute graveness on Baker's face in this scene just absolutely sells it. And his sort of disgust that Sarah Jane still wants to kill the Daleks as the scene continues, it's just it's just great, man. It's acting at its finest. I'd say if The Ark in Space wasn't the one where Tom Baker sort of comes into his own as the Doctor, this is definitely the one. Because this is the one that gives you a performance that just makes you go, wow! So yeah, no, this is a really solid performance from Baker. Next up is Michael Wisher as Davros, and what can I say that hasn't already been said? I'll say something negative first, because that's always a good way to start things off. For me, Terry Malloy is still the definitive Davros, but Michael Wisher is a close second, and he gets, the credit of being the first one to do it, and he is really fucking solid in this. He really nails that creepy element to it, and he's genuinely scary, too. So, it's a really solid performance from Wisher. He bounces off Tom Baker really well, which is a key thing, and it just really brings the story together, I think, those two actors specifically, bouncing off each other in the way in which they do. It's just really fucking cool to see. Liz Sladen plays Sarah is a bit whiny here. I know that's probably a directing thing, but this is where, I think a lot of people's issues with Sarah post the Pertwee era start, is Sarah stops being sort of this really strong woman and does embrace the more damsel in distress side of being the Doctor's female companion in the 1970s. So, it's probably not Liz Sladen's fault. She plays whiny and distressed just fine. It's just, annoying. And that's a shame how she's been written. But, yeah, I guess Liz Sladen plays it off okay. Ian Marter is also really good in this story. He gets a lot to do, and works really well as well. So there isn't really a story where Ian Marter doesn't work well. He's pretty much just fucking on point every time he's on screen. I love the man. He will forever be my favorite Fourth Doctor companion. And finally I come to Peter Miles, the man who plays Niter, Davros' right-hand man, and probably a bigger threat than Davros actually is in this story to the Doctor and his friends. Niter is everywhere. He's very cold and calculating. He's very deceitful, and it's just... Peter Miles plays him perfectly. He's like a Shakespearean villain. It's really well done and amazing. But yeah, so those are the performances that I really thought stood out in this story. Other than that, I don't think there's a lot left to say. This story's really fun. It's very important to Doctor Who's history as a whole, and I guess we come to the question now, is it overrated? And although this is a really, really fucking solid story, I can see people having trouble watching it nowadays with how, TV is now. This is like 2.5 hours. It's the length of what would be considered a very long movie nowadays. And it isn't paced like a movie either. None of Classic Who is paced like a movie. It's meant to be digested over the course of time. So, like, yeah, I can see this one getting a bit long and tedious in some people's eyes, because the Doctor and his companions really are running around the same set for, like, 3 episodes. I can see it being a bit of a hassle to get through, so in one way, I don't think it's the best thing since sliced bread, but because I have my classic Who love goggles on, it's really fucking solid. As far as classic Who goes, this is one of the greats, this is one of the best, and I'd recommend it to anybody in a heartbeat.